This series will try and give you an understanding on how to use Blender basically. It aims to give you a taste into the great world of 3D. By the end, it is my hope that you'll be able to go away and apply the things that you have learnt to your own projects. Blender is a free, open source 3D software. Its open source nature has facilitated in a vibrant and helpful community that create add-ons and other useful scripts for you to enhance your Blender experience. If you need answers on specific subjects or problems, you only need ask. Good forums for such answers are Blender's YouTube community. YouTubers such as Andrew Price, Creative Shrimp, Blender Diplome, Sadi Packs are all very good resources. The website Blender Artist is also a great forum for useful information regarding Blender. Blender can be used for many visual tasks and problems, such as model making by means of geometric manipulation or dynamic sculpting, much like ZBrush. It is fully capable of creating physics-based simulations of particles, smoke, cloth, fluid, and soft and hard bodies. Blender comes with its own node-based compositor, much like Nuke except very rudimentary at best. It is also capable of animations and comes with two fully integrated render engines, cycles and internal. We'll get into those a bit later. Why should you use Blender? Why not 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, or even Maya? Well, I'm not going to tell you not to use those programs, which are considered to be the industry standard within the world of CG. They are very good. But what I am going to say is that Blender is also very good, despite what many people will say. Blender is just another great tool to have in your repertoire. Blender is a very robust program that allows you the freedom to express yourself creatively very quickly while not being bound to reality. Well, for those that don't know, there are multiple builds of Blender out on the net, some doing very different things than others. However, the most official and most stable release is at www.blender.org, the official site of the Blender Foundation. Or if you wish, alternatively, you could download Blender on Steam. I think as of this moment, the current version is 2.76b and 2.77 is just around the corner. I personally use the Steam version because it updates itself. And I get to look at how many hours I've spent wasting my time on it. So far in the past 7 weeks, I think I've racked up about 635 hours on the program. Yes, I should get out more, but we all know that's not going to happen. Okay, so you've got Blender now. So what are the specifications of Blender? What do you need? What is a must-have? Well, on the screen now, you should see the hardware specifications that you should ideally have before running this program. However, I'm going to give you a few, not tips, just recommendations of what I think you really should have. Firstly, you should have a mouse, a 3-button mouse. This is going to really help you. And secondly, you want a keyboard with a numpad. Now, if you don't have a numpad, like many laptops don't, that's not a problem. I will show you soon what you can do to fix that. Okay, upon opening Blender, this is what you should have, or what you should be seeing. Mine's just slightly different. I've had to kind of rearrange what I originally had, but that's okay. Now I'm going to not go over all the buttons or all the UI just yet, because Blender is inundated with a fair few buttons. I know that's what I first thought when I first saw this. I was like, how the hell am I going to learn what each and every single one of these things does? I did eventually, but it did take a while. and I could talk for hours on end on what each thing does, and I'm just not going to do that just yet. What I plan to do is go through step by step, little by little, and eventually and hopefully you will begin to understand what everything does. That is my hope, at least. What I am going to address now is a very common problem that I see with people just starting out, and that is the navigation of the UI. So Blender's UI is broken up into windows. By default, you start up with 5 windows open. You got the info window, you have the outliner, you have the properties window, the timeline, and the 3D view. The start and end of each window can be seen by the arrows in each corner of the window, in the bottom left and the upper right. As you can see, this is the beginning and the end of the 3D window. As you can see, when I put my cursor over these arrows, my cursor changes. What if I left clicked and dragged? Oh no, look at that. Look what happened. I've split my window. Well, what I've done is that I've created a new window. And down here, I can tell it what type of window that I want it to be. So I may want it to be a UV image editor, or possibly a logic editor, maybe a text editor, a movie clip editor, and so on and so forth. Now, a common problem that I see is that people keep on splitting their window and they don't know what they're doing. And things can become incredibly messy very, very quickly. One thing that you can do, oh no, that doesn't work anymore. Never mind. Well, to fix this, all that you have to do is find the beginning and the end, or beginning or end of each window, and drag it up. And as you can see, there's an arrow. And what that means is that you are going to merge these two windows, and done. So I'm just going to do that now for all these windows that I've created, and voila, back to normal. So if that does happen, and it did happen a lot to me, and I had no clue what was happening. I'm like, oh no, how am I going to fix this? That's all you have to do. It's not a big problem. It's very useful if you know what you're doing, but that's just there in case you are interested. That is the main problem that I see a lot when starting out, just making a mess and cluttering up the UI. So I hope that does help. Next, I'm going to show you how exactly to save the images that you create in Blender. I'm not going to show you just yet how to start making stuff, because that's a bit down the road. We still have to cover a fair few things. So this is your properties window here. And this camera icon up here, this is your render tab. And this is going to be a very useful tab that you want to become familiar with. So here you can set your resolution of your images, which is going to be where your camera is pointing, and you can go to the camera view by pressing the 0 numpad, or going down here and selecting view, align view, no wait, go to camera and active camera. Or if that doesn't want to work, there we go. So you got your resolution. This 50% bar here, that's just telling Blender to render 50% of your resolution. Now this is good for just getting a general idea of what your image is going to look like without taxing the computer too much. Your frame range is basically how long you want your animation to render for. Quick tip, if you press this button here to render an animation, it will render all these frames. So if you just want to render an image, just click render, not animation. You have your frame rate, very self-explanatory, 24, 25, 29.97, so on and so forth. And down here is very important, the output. So here is where you designate where you want your files to go and what type of file you want. As a general rule, when animating or rendering animations, you want to render separate image files for each and every frame. Why this is because sometimes when rendering, especially very long projects, if you're rendering a video file and something happens, I don't know, a blackout occurs or your computer just dies for no reason, that file's gone. That's corrupted. If, however, you're rendering separate image files or image sequence as it is called, you can just restart where you left off. There's no problem because it's rendering different images instead of one file. So good files to render them as are either PNG, which is a lossless file type, or a Targa. I like to render as Targa. Both files come with RGBA traditionally. What that means is that it renders red, green, blue, and alpha, alpha being transparency, which is very useful when you're compositing. So if you just click here on this folder icon, you can go into your files and just find somewhere to save everything to. And when you're done with that, you just click render. If you render an image, it doesn't save it to your output, but if you would like to save it to an output, you just press image, save as image, and save it somewhere. If you press animation, it is going to generate all the images in a sequence and name them accordingly and place them in your output. So that's something to understand before just jumping in. As I said before, Blender comes with two internal render engines. There is Blender Render and Cycles. Now you can switch between these two, or you can choose which one you wish to use from up here. See here it says Blender Render. Well, if we click this, we'll come up with by default, three options: Blender Render, Blender Game, and Cycles Render. Blender Game is just the game engine and it is very useful when using Blender Render, or if you want to create a game, but that's not what we're going to cover. We're just covering traditional animation here. So we're just going to be looking at Blender Render and Cycles Render. Both are useful. Both have pros and cons. Now I'm going to tell you the difference. Blender Render is a bias renderer. It has fake lighting and is very simple. Now for pros, it's got a very fast render speed. It has a simple yet effective material setup. It's got a robust yet easy to fake lighting system. Again, like I said before, Blender game settings, some of them apply to some aspects of the internal render. And it has halo materials. They are incredibly useful. Halos are awesome. I'm just going to say that. Now the cons. Its motion blur sucks, like a lot. It has fake lighting if not done correctly. It is very basic at times, and its node-based materials are not as intuitive as cycles. What I mean by that is, you'll understand eventually. We won't get into that just quite yet. It's fairly advanced. Now, cycles, on the other hand, as you can see, a few things changed. Cycles is an unbiased renderer, and its lighting system is meant to emulate how the real world works. So light bounces off objects and reflects onto other objects. If you have an understanding of that, that should really help when using cycles. Now, cycles has great quality lighting. It has got a great node-based material creator. Very, very, very powerful. Much more control. It has access to GPU rendering, which means instead of rendering via the CPU, it can render via the GPU. This is very good if you have a very good GPU. I personally don't. My GPU, I believe, is a GTX 645, so a mid-range. And it has proper equirectangular rendering, which is useful when creating equirectangular images. So a sky map, for example. Its cons, it is incredibly sluggish. It is so painfully slow, it isn't funny. And the node system may be a bit advanced for some new users. And another big con is it has no halos, no halo materials. That's a very big downside to cycles. I recommend, and I know this is where a lot of people like to ask, oh yeah, which one's better? Both are great. Use both. Both have their purposes. I personally like using cycles for rendering just images because it doesn't take that long in the grand scheme of things. And I like using internal to render large animations. So I think a combination of both is in order here. And that's what we're going to be going through. We're going to go through how to use both. Firstly, I'm going to show you how to use Blender Internal, and then we're going to move on to cycles rendering. You should now have an idea as to whether or not you wish to pursue this line of interest, as well as the rudimentary tools that you will need to follow along in subsequent tutorials. I hope that this has given you a basic understanding of what Blender is and how it works. In the next episode, we will begin to learn how to use the 3D window. Until next time, Hayden Falzon.